like to talk to you, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Like, is racism? What is racism exactly? How will you define it?
Well, let me state my definition of racism, because this is the most important thing that black people have to understand in the 21st century. All of the problems that we face, all of the issues that we confront are related to this very powerful dynamic that people do not want us to talk about, but it is the one thing that we all have to get a comprehensive understanding of. My definition of racism is, first of all, racism is white supremacy. White supremacy is racism. There's no such thing as black racism or yellow racism. Racism means power to determine what happens to other people. So my definition is racism, white supremacy is the local and global power system and dynamic, structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth, a planet upon which the vast and overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white, meaning black, brown, red, and yellow, by white-skinned people, and all of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white-skinned people. Now, that might seem a little bit complicated to some, but to break it down, everybody needs to think about President Barack Obama. His father was a black man. His mother is white. Because black is a genetically dominant trait and white is a genetic recessive trait, when those two individuals got together, the child that they produced is non-white or black or shade of black. And this will always happen. And because people who classify themselves as white, see, they don't fool around and call themselves Euro-Americans. Mm-hmm. They are absolutely clear. They call themselves white. They trick the non-white people into calling themselves such names as Asian American, African American, but they call themselves by a genetic term which keeps them oriented. And so just imagine if the overwhelming majority of people on planet Earth are black, brown, red, and yellow, meaning dominant in terms of skin coloration. If they were free to move around the planet and the men of color related to the minority number of white females, then white would disappear. People who classify themselves as white determined as far back as the 15th century when they began to come out of Europe and they realized that the majority people on the planet were colored people, black, brown, red, and yellow. If the men had sex with the women, they realized that all the children ended up looking like the mothers, not the fathers, meaning white would disappear. And from that point on, they knew that they had to dominate all of the people of color on the planet. That domination was called various things. It was called imperialism, colonialism, neocolonialism, but all of it meant people with white skins who classify themselves as white had to, by any means necessary, maintain control and domination of the colored world majority Otherwise, they would genetically disappear. Now, we have not understood that. People have focused on, oh, the problem is economics, or the problem is religion. Currently, right now, we hear people talking about, and you have a person in Congress whose name is King, talking about the Muslims this, the Muslims this, the Muslims are terrorists. He is talking about a religion, but fundamentally he's talking about colored people. It's like during the Second World War, Adolf Hitler talked about the Jews are doing this, the Jews are doing this, we must kill the Jews, or we must destroy the Jews, or we must put them in concentration camps. If you read Hitler's work, he wrote a book that's entitled Mein Kampf. He says in that book that he was not really interested in their religion. He said they are not white people. And all you have to do is look at the map where people of the Jewish religion originated from in North Africa. So these were, the word Semite is the same as the word mulatto. When people from Europe began to invade the countries on the northern part of Africa, they produced a mulatto population. They called that population Semites, meaning half black and half white. And so that mixed race, when those people began to move up into Europe, and they began to realize because of the genetic dominance of people of color, that white would disappear. And so Adolf Hitler came along and said, we are going to kill these people. And so he rounded up the people, put them in concentration camps, and eventually gassed them or otherwise destroyed them. Now, we may think, oh, nothing like that can ever happen again. As a matter of fact, the Semites of the Jewish religion have a slogan, never again, never forget and never again. They even have they have Holocaust memorial museums in different parts of the country. The major one is here in Washington, D.C. But in spite of that, I maintain it is happening again. How, in what form does it take? It takes the form of the unemployment, first of all. The unemployment of black males, forcing them into the selling of drugs and using guns. Then you make laws to put them in long-term incarceration when they use those drugs and use those guns. And so you are removing a huge segment of the black male population. The definition of genocide is when you interfere with the reproductivity of a given group of people. And just like everyone talks about now, 70% of black families are female-headed, single-parent, female-headed households. Now, you can't have this sustained development of a people when the men are being destroyed, and black men are being destroyed. That's why black male children are dropping out of school. They're more in prison than are in the colleges. And vast numbers of unemployed. They say that white unemployment is like 9%. In many of our communities, it's 40, 50%, if not more. Men who are unemployed. And another thing that we see happening is because there are no men in the homes, black male children are being effeminized. And we have movies that are coming out, the Tyler Perry movies, and there are a couple of other movies that are coming out where black men are wearing dresses. At Morehouse College in Atlanta, it used to be the capstone of black male education. The president had to come out last year and say, black male students are not going to be allowed to wear dresses or high-heel shoes. You see, so if you turn the male population into females, you are engaging in genocide, even though it is not on the surface recognized as such. But this is indeed what is happening. Now, black people are not talking about, we don't have a single spokesperson. You know, like of our spokes, we got, smart black people. Mm-hmm. But every black spokesperson who gets to go to the White House or gets to teach in any of the colleges and universities is afraid to talk about racism, white supremacy. Because if you talk about racism, white supremacy, you will get in trouble. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, when he was getting ready to be elected, he said that this important topic of racism needed to be talked about. If you remember the Attorney General, black man Eric Holder, both of these are the first black men in these exalted positions. And Eric Holder came out with his very important statement, are we a nation of cowards because we are afraid to talk about racism? And I maintain until proven otherwise, these two black men were told, I don't care if you're Attorney General, I don't care if you're the President of the United States, you are not going to talk about this critical topic, racism, white supremacy. So the only thing that black people can talk about are the symptoms of the disease. Like, I'm a physician. I've been a physician since 1962. Mm-hmm. That a physician knows that if a patient comes to your office complaining of various symptoms, let's say coughing, headache, maybe fever, the bad physician will say, okay, you have a cough, let me give you some Robitussin. You have a headache, let me give you an analgesic, an aspirin or something. You have a fever, let me give you an analgesic for that. A good physician will look at the patient, examine the patient, and say, are these all symptoms related to a disease process? If they are symptoms related to a disease process, I need to understand what the disease is so I can treat the cause of the symptoms. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's just like police brutality, driving while black. Those are symptoms of the disease of racism, white supremacy, although I don't really call racism, white supremacy a disease. It is a political construct to achieve a specific end result. You see, but I can talk about police brutality for days. I can talk about black male children dropping out of school. I can talk about all children doing poorly on exams. I can talk about single-parent households. I can talk about all of those things as separate entities. But it's just like if a house is flooded, a dumb person just goes and gets a mop. Mm-hmm. A smart person is going to say, where is the water coming from? And let me cut off the water. Because I can mop for 1,000 years, and the water will keep coming. That's just like a main, if a water main breaks. You see, the water is gushing down the street, people are drowning, and somebody says, well, let's get water, get some buckets and start throwing the water over here. The smart person says, where is the water coming from? Let's cut off the main pump to stop the flow of the water. Now, this is what we are prevented from talking about, and if a black person mentions racism on the television, then the white host of the television show or the radio show will start screaming, "You're playing the race card."
Right.
See, the whole deck is racism, white supremacy. But we have to understand exactly what it is. Neely Fuller, who wrote the textbook for victims of racism, and who was the first person, a black man in the District of Columbia, the first person to say racism is a global system for maintaining the power equation of white power over a relative non-white powerlessness. And he says, if you do not understand white supremacy racism, what it is and exactly how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Now, this is where we are now. See, we don't even understand why we just passed through February, right? The Civil Rights Movement. And in the 60s, when black people had their dignity and their self-respect and their courage, and they were going to march and get the vote and get public accommodations, even while police on horses were trampling them down and beating them up with billy clubs, and some people died in that struggle. The people were attacked with water hoses. But their dignity and their pride and their self-respect kept them moving forward in spite of the counterattack on the part of people interested in maintaining white supremacy. I maintain that the system saw, wait a minute, if we let these people maintain their self-respect and their dignity, their respect for themselves and one another, then the system of white supremacy is going to be in trouble. So what we have to do is turn these people around. And so then what did we end up with? Because we didn't understand what the system was. We thought it's just like doing our formal period of enslavement, which was a phase of racism, white supremacy. During that period, black people who were enslaved, we felt if they just took the chains off, we would be okay. And so you had slave revolts, and then you had Lincoln emancipating the slaves in order to keep the white people together as a union, not because he loved black people.
Right. And
so the slaves were freed, and we thought, wonderful. And the black people started doing different things, and then the people who classify themselves as whites say, wait a minute, we cannot have black people running businesses, we can't have them holding political office. So what we have to do is have the Ku Klux Klan, establish the Klan, where people would be beaten up, the men would be lynched and castrated, people would be driven out of their homes and their property confiscated. So, in other words, the emancipation was turned on its head, and white supremacy was reconstructed. Like they call period of Reconstruction. Some people turn that around and say, well, that was when people went into black people went into political office. Reconstruction was, once the power was taken away from the slaveholders, the slaves were emancipated, but we had to give the power back to the slaveholders, and whether the slaveholders were in the South or whether they were in the North. In other words, white people had to maintain their power. And so after the Civil Rights Movement, where the laws were changed, and so then the system said, wait a minute, we cannot have these black people going forward talking about black is beautiful, black pride, black dignity, black self-respect, black power. So what happened was the system said, what we're going to do, we're going to tell them they can be movie stars. But what we're going to have them do in those movies, they're going to be drug sellers, like Superfly.
Right.
They're going to be selling drugs. The men are going to be cursing out the women and beating up the women, and the men are going to be shooting and killing each other. And so that's the black people started thinking, oh, they're paying us money. And we think it's not black power, it's green power.
Mm-hmm.
So people were being paid to engage in their self-destruction. But not understanding racism as a system, they went forward. Then you had young black people coming forward, creating what they called hip-hop. And one of the first major records was Fear of the Black Planet, that people had taken from Public Enemy, took that from the paper I wrote, the Cress Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism.
Mm.
But the system said, wait a minute, we can't have these black people listening to a political message. So what we have to do, they don't understand what we're doing. They're just focused on making money. So what we can do is tell them, no, we want dirty, trashy lyrics. And we will completely annihilate their self-respect. In a short period of time, we will have them calling themselves niggers and dogs and gangsters and thugs and bitches and hoes, and we will have annihilated completely their self-respect, and they won't have a clue as to what has happened to them. And just this past week in Washington, D.C., in Crystal City of Virginia, a group of young people, young adult people that were supposed to be giving out hip-hop awards, what did they do? In a big hotel, all dressed up. They started fighting each other, kicking over tables, breaking glass, hitting each other over the head with chairs. It was a complete and absolute disgrace. Now, as a psychiatrist, I say, if you listen to the lyrics that for the most part have absolutely nothing to do with self-respect, then you will understand, well, this behavior is logical. This behavior is being listened to by all the people who are fighting each other and all the people who are killing each other in the street. The system of racism and white supremacy wants to see black people out of the picture. And so, yes, now the videos we want you to make, the movies we want you to look at, black people will be demeaning and degrading themselves, and we won't have to overtly do anything. We will set them up, and they will destroy themselves and one another. Now, this is where we are.
And Dr. Welsing, I want to ask you, Sister Jazz, you have anything to ask Dr. Welsing?
I'm sorry.
Well, actually, I've agreed with everything. I've been so quiet because I agree with everything that has been said thus far. But I just want to know how you really, like, something, a plan, because my thing is that I agree, right? I know that we come from kings and queens and scholars and inventors and explorers, and part of who we are now is the fact that we have been denied our history. We get a month or whatever, but it at the same time that we get a month, they separate our history from the world's history. So blacks and minority Americans, we have a separate history, so we don't get to learn it all the time in school. And I don't know, I've been in school 20 years, essentially, like my whole life. And I'm just now finding out about our rich, wonderful history because it isn't something that is taught. But I just don't know. Well, what are your thoughts really on how that we can get our self-respect back, get our self-esteem back? Because it's one thing to to, have it stolen from us. But now we're kind of just giving it away. We call each other nigger, and we call each other bitches, and
well, let me not cut you off, but just as I was just saying, we are in the presence of a system structure that we do not understand. See, you ask, what do we do based on what do I understand the problem to be?
Right.
And that's why I went through that explanation. I said racism is the problem. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois in 1903 said the problem of the 20th century is the question of the color line, by which he meant the system of racism, white supremacy. And Mr. Neely Fuller came along in the mid-20th century and said, this is a system. This is a total system for maintaining white power over non-white powerlessness. See, it's critically important that we understand what we are talking about. See, anytime a person says, well, what do we do? Do about what? What is the problem? See, it's just like a person has to understand fire before they know how to put a fire out. If a fire breaks out in the house, a person who doesn't understand fire will say, here's a can of grease. Let's throw the grease on the fire. And the fire will get bigger because grease will enhance the burning of the fire. The person who understands fire will say we need water, or maybe we need to get out of here as quickly as possible. So what we want to do is jump over, and this is why black people keep saying, we got to get an agenda. We got to get an agenda. We got to get an agenda. We got to have a conference and get an agenda. An agenda becomes elusive as long as the problem has not been defined. We can't do anything without understanding what it is exactly that we are dealing with. And we can talk about black people were the first people on this planet, the first human beings. We're the mothers and fathers of everybody on this planet. But nobody on the continent of Africa has discovered the answer to the system of racism, white supremacy. And this is our challenge today. This is our challenge for the 21st century. So we can't jump into what is to be done until we fully understand what is the problem. See, and racism, white supremacy necessitates an attack on black people in general and black male persons in particular. Why? Because it's only the men who can impose sexual intercourse, which is why, following slavery, black men were accused of looking at white women, wanted to think about looking at white women, and they were lynched and their testicles and penises were cut off. And they were hung in trees. The men had to be attacked. And there has been no cessation of the men being attacked, even though we have a black man sitting in the White House.
Right.
But he has no power to talk about racism, white supremacy, which is a specific problem of black people.
Dr. Wells, I want to add to that because I noticed when you talking about the symptoms, and I know that I talked to a friend of mine in the radio business down in Louisiana, and he had sent me a press release about, it's like, there's a lot of black males in Louisiana, for example, that are being tasered to death. And you look around the country with Oscar Grant, getting killed at the BART station, and you look at in New York City with Sean Bell, and even like with the ascent of a black president, there are more black males being tasered by the police throughout the whole country. There's not really being reported on the news, and would you agree that racism is also a mental illness and also a sexual dysfunction then? If we're talking about racism in these terms you've been talking about.
No. See, that's like, in other words, there's some people who prefer not to talk about Adolf Hitler had a plan of racism, white supremacy, and destroying anybody who could cause white genetic annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't want to talk about that. So some people say Hitler was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
No, Hitler had an idea and a plan, and the majority of the German people went along with Hitler. We are going to kill and destroy the people who we classify as non-white, whether they're Semites or whether they're Gypsies or whether they're the black people in Germany who were the remnants of the people left over from the black soldiers who were in World War I. So the problem is a problem about understanding white supremacy, and Hitler, I say he's not crazy anymore. It doesn't make sense to call the people who practice racism, white supremacy, crazy. No, the white minority realized in the 15th century that they were a minority on the planet and they could be genetically annihilated. And they decided, we don't want to be genetically annihilated. So we have to control the non-white people, especially according to the color code. If you are black, get back. If you are brown, stick around. If you are yellow, you're mellow. And if you're white, you're right. Because black people, people who have the most skin color, have the greatest genetic power to cause white genetic annihilation. It's just like in my office last night. I had a parent telling me about dark-skinned, beautiful black lady, telling me about how difficult a time she had growing up because people were calling her, you're real black. Her daughter now has the same problem. I had a parent come to me who told me, my daughter says she's going to commit suicide because the boys tell her she's too dark to date. It's just like Kanye West said, there wouldn't be hip-hop video if it wasn't for the light-skinned black girls. Because we don't want dark-skinned black girls to be in our productions. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, see, this is self-destruction that we do not even know we have. We just think it may be cute, I guess. But the people who classify themselves as white are a tiny minority on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to program a large percentage of the non-white people who will hate themselves and hold up white supremacy. So those are all the non-white people, whether they're in Africa, Asia, in this part of the world, who want to bleach their skin, meaning I hate my color just like the white people hate my color, and I want to be white and I want to have long blonde hair, and so I buy hair that's from the Asians. Like I predict they'll be taking the scalps of dead Asian people and transplanting that on the heads of people who don't want to have short hair.
Oh, wow.
See, just like plastic surgery, it'll graduate to that. You see, or people can go into a clinic and say, I hate my black self, so I want to have a sperm from blonde Scandinavian, and I'll pay $20,000 for that, and then I'll have a light baby because I hate my color. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am. I also want to jump and conclude, like you said, something about the hip-hop, which is a great point. You know, today is like the 14th anniversary of the passing of Christopher Wallace, a.k.a. Notorious B.I.G., and my sister was talking about what they were talking about on Twitter today. They were saying, would Notorious B.I.G. be as successful as Jay-Z if he was still alive? And a lot of folks say, no, he wouldn't be successful because he was too black. He was too dark.
Is that right?
Yeah, he was too dark, and he wouldn't be accepted. He's too dark, meaning he was too ugly. And he was already, fat, of course, but they're talking about because he was darker than Jay-Z, and Jay-Z was lighter skinned, Jay-Z would have still been more successful than Notorious B.I.G.
See, so you can see all of this I call this psychological brainwashing. You see, it's just like black men putting on dresses.
Right.
This is psychological castration. See, if a black man wants to give up being a male, and so he'll put on a dress, he has been subjected to psychological castration without even realizing and understanding what has happened. You see, or I'll be a part-time female and I'll be on the down low. All of these are behaviors that are related to the specific stress of racism, white supremacy. Do you see, which is like annihilating black color, annihilating black masculinity, because this is the threat that I perceive, which is why, police brutality and the so-called police officer, white police officer, will shoot a black male, and then he'll say, I thought he had a weapon. Well, the weapon he has is genetic, is his genitals.
Right.
Do you see? But he'll say, oh, I thought he had a gun. But he subconsciously is aware that the black male's testicles, genetic material are much more powerful than his, and can cause, it's causing white genetic annihilation. So these are things that we must understand. Black people, if I could wave a magic wand, black people would not be dancing anymore. Every black person already has a PhD in dance, PhD in singing, PhD in playing ball. Now it's time for us to start being quiet and serious and thinking. But see, this is why they want us listening to banging loud music that'll, give you sensory overload and cut your brain off from being able to do any sustained thinking, critical thinking. You'd just be acting like a robot who has been programmed to self-hate. Now, this is what we have to begin to understand, because if a system is structured for their genetic survival, it's illogical to think that the system is going to set up the conditions for the maximal development of the black genetic and constitutional potential, or the maximal development, in economics, education, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. See, and another way that we have been brainwashed is giving black people the image of God as a white man. See, if you are presented with the image of Jesus as white, the brain, that's supposed to be the Son of God. Well, the brain doesn't compute the Father has to be black. The brain computes the Father must be white. So black people are, thousands and thousands of black people are in churches every Sunday. White God, please love me. I love the white God more than I love anybody else. The God looks just like every other white man that they see on the street. But we don't, because we don't understand. People just say, oh, no, that's religion. That doesn't mean anything. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
I mean, you said the cross was like it was a phallic symbol. It represents the black male's genitals. And
well, say that again, dear.
You said it represents the black male's genitals, and his penis. The cross did. The cross.
The cross. That's what I maintain. You see, because if you drew a picture of the testicles, well, it's in the ISIS papers.
Right.
Where you have testicle, phallus, testicle, and you just make a line drawing through that, and you have a cross. And so if you hang a little white man on that, a dead white man, these are symbols that the brain crunches. And the brain gets a whole paragraph or a whole page of information just looking at a symbol. It's just like a computer compiles data on little tiny circuits. And the brain crunches data into symbolic material so that you don't even have to talk about what the symbol means. that the brain will also register it. Do you see? It's just like when people classify themselves as white, see a swastika, or they see the stars and bars and that cross, even though they're at an angle. They understand subconsciously what that is all about. Do you see? Now, I would prefer that instead of black people, like in the state of South Carolina, you know, where the people who classify themselves as white insist upon showing the stars and the bars. I think that black people, see, if we acknowledge that we're in a system of racism, white supremacy, not a system of democracy. We are in a system of racism, white supremacy. And so the swastika or the stars and bars, that black people would say, well, you know, we wish that we were not in a system of racism, white supremacy, but we recognize that we are. And so these symbols of white supremacy are appropriate for the system. It's just like the Star-Spangled Banner. That symbol is red, white, and blue. And the flag is just like looking at a lateral view of the phallus and the testicles, where the flag is red, white, and blue. That means white skin through which you can see blue veins and red arterioles.
Right. So, Dr.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I was like, there's so many people want to get in. Man, they got so many questions they're raising. I got the phone lines jammed. I just want to get in some people to talk to you because, I mean, it's not every day. And we got a brother named Marcellus Lovelace, a brilliant artist from your hometown, Chicago. We want to wish you an early happy birthday. Because I know your birthday is on March the 18th, correct?
Oh, thanks.
So he want to wish you, I mean, he's really said, I hope that, you inspire him with your words and with your actions. And I just want to hit up the Delta. There's so many people from around the country have called in, from Virginia, from Cleveland, from L.A., from all around the world in the chat room. I appreciate all the love for Dr. Welsing. So I just want to return that to her. Sister Margaret Block, a Civil Rights Veteran Hall of Fame, recently inducted in Selma, Alabama. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
So welcome to We All Be Always. Sister Margaret Block, a true freedom fighter and singer, veteran of the Mississippi Civil Rights Campaign. How are you doing tonight, ma'am?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm fine. I can't complain. You got anything to say to Dr. Welsing or want to add?
Yeah, because yeah, I wanted to ask.
Okay.
Well, you know that I'm really into these schools and what they're doing to these kids, to these little black boys in particular. Got setting them up to go to prison. I mean, they just virtually telling them if you don't read, you're going to jail. You're not going to finish school and you're going to jail. They don't say that to a little white boy that can't read. If he's in the 4th grade, it's only directed at the black male. They don't even consider, I mean, if that's the only group that's been designated to go to jail in case they can't read. And the teachers are falling for it. They going along with that nonsense. And I just don't know.
Again, yeah. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, based on what I have been saying, that this is tragically true. But if the system is what I say it is, this is logical that there would be this kind of attack on black males, black people in general, black males in particular, beginning with little children. I talked to a 6-year-old in my office, smart as he could be, in the 1st grade. What does the teacher say? I want to hold him back. The smartest little person, I want to hold him back. I'm just looking at genius. Do you see? So this is the problem. But just complaining about it, I would prefer that black people be able to say, instead of not wanting to talk about racism, that black people say, we now understand the system of racism, white supremacy, and we understand this attack on black people in general and black male persons in particular. And we're going to talk about what this system is. In the meantime, we are going to stop playing with sex and breeding and studying as we were programmed to do in formal slavery, to produce more slaves. We are going to respect ourselves as black people. We are going to respect our genitals, and we are not going to play with sex and producing children that we cannot take care of, because we have to be the primary and fundamental teachers of our children. And I see so many black male children who are in a state of depression that turns into bad behavior because they're missing their fathers. I'm not saying the fathers are bad. The system says as much as I can cause black male unemployment, I'm going to do it. Because if a black man is employed, he can take care of his family, and his family will be stabilized. I'd rather spend $45,000 or $50,000 keeping a black man in prison than giving him a WPA job, helping to build the infrastructure. No, that would strengthen black families. So I would rather spend that money putting him in prison, having him freak his sexual behavior, hopefully pick up HIV/AIDS, and when he comes out, he can spread it to the rest of the people, and they can just die off. Now, we have to understand that. And don't spend any time hating white people. Just understand what they do. Don't spend any time being discourteous and disrespectful. Take all of our energy and understand what we have to do ourselves for our maximal development. And genetically, we're not inferior to anybody. Everybody on the planet has come from us.
Right.
But we have been reduced to the lowest level by this system of racism, white supremacy, and we have to retrieve ourselves.
Okay, we're going to take a... Go ahead, Dr. Welsing, you finish?
No, I would say if I could wave a magic wand, you know, and probably the listeners, everybody would be cursing me. But if I could wave a magic wand, black people would be saying, oh, wait a minute, we don't have sex until we are 30 and 35 and until we are married. And no more than 2 children, no closer together than 3 years apart, because we are in a war. Mm-hmm. War is being waged against us, and we have to produce strong people. And strong people require that they have strong, mature parents when they're very young. I would be out of business as a psychiatrist if people were getting their emotional needs met when they were very young. Just before you call, talking to a patient. Mm-hmm. Smart, but feeling I can't achieve my dreams because I didn't get my emotional needs met when I was young. My mother was 17. She didn't know how to be a parent. See, these are not bad people. These are circumstances that are imposed upon us. But the correction is not going to come from the system that is imposing it. We have to begin to understand how we make the correction. Sex is fabulous, but so what? When you're in a war, you are not jumping out of a foxhole talking about I got to get some sex when bullets are flying around. You'll get some if you get home, and you go get some maybe if you know how to end the war. So we're going to have to radically transform what we were thinking about sex. It's like, again, for 300 years we were enslaved. Right. We were breeders and we were studs. The children were transformed or shipped to another plantation, just like we're sending children to foster care. Right. Going from one foster home to another foster home, being sexually abused in this one, not taken care of in the next one. So we have to understand, not hate ourselves, not demean ourselves, not call ourselves names. We have to say, this is fascinating. We didn't really understand this system. Now we're beginning to understand the system, so we know what our individual personal agendas have to be, what our collective agenda has to be. We have to be responsible for the maximal development of the black genetic and constitutional potential.
All right, we take another call. So many people want to talk. Area code, you remember the area code 301. You on the air?
Yes.
752.
Thank you.
All right, welcome,
yes.
man. Welcome to the show, man. Thanks for waiting.
Yes.
You can talk.
Thank you. Yes, this is Black Achievement in your chat room.
Hey, brother, Black Achievement. It's nice to finally talk to you.
Yes, finally. Yeah, I was tired last time. Thank you, Dr. Welsing. I got to go back to the beginning of the show to get a better understanding. I got two very connected, related questions. The first is dealing with the recessive dominant gene. How far should we take this? Example would be Halle Berry. Halle Berry, black father, white mother. She says she's black. Okay. She has a baby with a man who says he's white. Halle says the baby's black.
Well, do you see what I'm saying? In other words, the father is either playing dumb deliberately or he is dumb. In other words, see, it's not a question of a white person having sexual relations with a black person and producing an offspring that has color. I mean, everybody has probably seen in the People magazine the little baby. The little baby is just a light-skinned black child. Do you see? There's zillions of light-skinned black people who are a product of immediate miscegenation or historic miscegenation in the preservation of light color, like don't marry anybody darker than yourself. So the fact is, if when that little baby grows up and goes to school, white people are not going to be looking at that little baby and saying she's white.
Right.
They're going to say, oh, she's colored.
Right.
She walks in a bank to get a loan, she's colored. She walks in to get a job, she's colored. So it's not up for discussion, just like you have white women who are having babies by black men. And then she teaches the little baby, you're not black, which means she hates black. If she loved that black man and she knows what goes on in the society, she'll tell the child, we live in a system of racism, white supremacy. You might be a little lighter than your father, but you are still considered black. My people, your grandparents, consider you to be black. And so you're going to have to respect yourself as a black person. See, this playing games about mixed race and all of this nonsense is just to confuse black people. Confuse people like Tiger Woods. So he can't play golf anymore because he didn't understand racism, white supremacy that says, why should a black man be the highest paid sports person? Let's trip him up. Let's have a whole lot of white women have sex with him, and then let's call him on it. And he won't know what hit him. And he hasn't been able to win golf since. So we have to understand racism, white supremacy. Be glad that we finally understand that it's about white genetic survival. And it's not going to change just because somebody says, I'm not black. See, you can walk in a bank and see whether you get a good loan and a good interest rate and determine whether you're black or not. Right. And so if a black person, see, it's like any tragically Halle Berry's father, maybe he wasn't around to give her knowledge and understanding about racism, white supremacy. You see, he might have been like many people, well, I want to escape being black, and so I'm going to marry white. Like Neely Fuller says, when a black man, this is a black man talking, when a black man is poor, he wants a job. This is under the system of racism. When he gets a job, he wants luxuries. When he gets luxuries, he wants a white woman. Now, black men can attest whether this is true or not. Then they need not be ashamed.
We are truly blessed today with some powerful words. And cultural expressions.
Indeed, an exercise in guerrilla hermeneutics. He says, Frances Cress Welsing, may her tribe increase. In fact, Brother Skia, this is the same pulpit that Reverend Wilson and Pastor Lamar occupied back this summer when Minister Farrakhan came to town to announce the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March.
Absolutely. This is a hallowed ground upon we sit, and it's an honor to be here and a part of the service.
Indeed. So we're hearing now from our officiant, James Small. He's about to introduce the group formerly known as Black Notes, Living Rhythm. Living Rhythm will be performing the song Living Rhythm here on WPFW 89.3 FM. For those of you, we're not in pledge season, but you heard Lauren Cress Love. We need you to support this venue, brother. Where else but here? So here's Living Rhythm with Living Rhythm.
We come in peace, love, light, supreme mystical power emerging from the darkness, glistening like sunlit moonlight duality, balanced in harmony. Tonight, today, forward, ancient, time transcendent, rhythmically flowing features constantly in the moving epic of African people, at home and away. Far away we come from Al-Kebulan, Kush, Kemet, culture, colorfully shaped with spirit of cycles, circles, seasons, song. Elders protected, wisdom injected, mother and earth respected, selfishness rejected for community reasons. Carter G. Woodson said it, spread it to the offspring, more valuable, more bright than bling for the soul, gold for the mind when you find hidden treasures of timeless truth. Our past, the ever-present, culture of divine wisdom suspended, must be extended to cross the path of our youth. Truth, like the last message of Malcolm.
Monumental mission, man. Motivated by a mountainous mural of melanated, miseducated, emasculated masses. Malcolm made major moves to master the map of a movement meant for mental and material matriculation into modern measures of emancipation. Malcolm lives!
Malcolm lives! Malcolm speaks!
Malcolm gives!
Malcolm gives!
Malcolm beats!
Malcolm beats!
Like the drum rhythm in our heartbeats. Boom, bang, bam, like Biko. Bad brother, brilliant. Brave beyond gravely brutal batons. Biko bared his soul, blaring black is beautiful. Black consciousness movement for beaten down Bantu brains, banned by backwards bandits. Biko brought bold brightness. His burial brought barely bearable pains. Biko lives!
Biko lives!
Speaks. In our heartbeat, Biko gives! Like loving, loyal, legit, like Lasana, laudable level leader, leading a line along Lumumba Lane, lion of Garveyistic Pan-Africanism, labored long in the melodious belly of the loathsomest lout, eluded its lures and left, loquacious, lyrical fella, lover of all things fella, Tosh, Chuck Brown, Gil Scott Heron. Illustrious life lands you in the lap of the ancestors. Lasana lives!
Lasana lives!
Lasana speaks!
Lasana speaks!
Speaks! Lasana gives!
Lasana gives!
Lasana beats!
Lasana beats!
And our heartbeats. Courageous woman, charismatic, creative warrior like Cress Welsing. Creative wellspring of deep black thought. Never crass or compromise. Cool as a cucumber, but white hot. Cress crashed myths that made blacks a mockery. Before the world, Welsing's ancestral Cress wisdom crushed Shockley in his little white ball of confusion. Theory proven. Cress Welsing lives!
Francis Cress Welsing lives!
Cress Welsing speaks! Cress Welsing gives!
Welsing gives!
Hold her up, y'all! Hold her up, y'all! Hold her up, y'all! Y'all got the program. Welsing beats and our heart beats. Cress Welsing lives!
Welsing lives!
Stand on your feet! Raise her up! Stand on your feet! Raise her up! Stand on your feet! Raise her up! Stand on your feet!
Welsing gives!
And our heart beats! And our heart beats! Let's keep her alive, y'all!
Welsing lives!
Let's keep her alive, y'all!
Welsing speaks!
Let's keep her alive, y'all! She beats! She beats!
Welsing gives!
Cress theory of color confrontation for the whole nation. A sensation. She beats! She beats!
Welsing lives!
I own our ISIS papers.
Welsing speaks!
Your freedom papers from now into eternity.
Welsing gives!
And our heart beats. Welsing beats.
Welsing beats!
Let's keep her alive, y'all. Come on and let's thrive. We gonna keep her alive, y'all. Hold her up and let's thrive. Let's thrive. Let's thrive. Ancestors live.
Ancestors speak.
Clap your hands, y'all.
Ancestors give. Ancestors speak.
And our heartbeats, we gonna keep them alive.
Ancestors live.
Our ancestors speak.
Ancestors speak.
We gonna keep them alive, y'all.
Ancestors give. Ancestors speak.
We have not called anyone out of their name.
Ancestors live.
We have not gossiped about anyone.
Ancestors
We have not squabbled with anyone. We have not snitched on anyone for personal gain. We have not cursed anyone.
Ancestors speak.
We have not been discourteous to anyone.
Ancestors live.
We have not been disrespectful to anyone. We have not stolen from anyone. We have not robbed anyone. We have not fought anyone. We have not killed anyone. We have not trashed our home, community, or workplace. We have not used or sold drugs. We have not encouraged black children to think they can be adequate mothers and fathers at a young age. We have not encouraged others to believe that welfare will save them and have encouraged them to believe in prosperity. We have not pretended that racism, white supremacy does not exist. We have not allowed any black, brown, or red or yellow person to be divided or conquered by the perpetrators of white supremacy.